Hello dear visitors, I'm happy to see you here once again, and today I have a question for you. What if I told you that one of the biggest fortifications in the whole Middle-earth of the Third Age was designed and built by hobbits, not by dwarves, nor was it built by elves or men, but by hobbits, who one would probably think were not the people to really stand out and express themselves as much in terms of architecture and especially in terms of fortification architecture. But still, this is the truth. And let's read the passage in The Lord of the Rings to see what I am talking about. This is an excerpt from Chapter 5, A Conspiracy Unmasked, The Lord of the Rings. Long ago, Gorhendad Oldbuck, head of the Oldbuck family, one of the oldest in the Marish or indeed in the Shire, had crossed the river, which was the original boundary of the land eastwards. He built and excavated Brandyhall, changed his name to Brandybuck, and settled down to become master of what was virtually a small independent country. His family grew and grew, and after his days continued to grow, until Brandyhall occupied the whole of the low hill and had 3 large front doors, many side doors, and about 100 windows. The Brandybucks and their numerous dependents then began to burrow, and later to build all round about. That was the origin of Buckland, a thickly inhabited strip between the river and the old forest, a sort of colony from the Shire. Its chief village was Bucklebury, clustering in the banks and slopes behind Brandyhall. The people in the Marish were friendly with the Bucklanders, and the authority of the Master of the Hall, as the head of the Brandybuck family was called, was still acknowledged by the farmers between Stock and Rushy. But most of the folk of the old Shire regarded the Bucklanders as peculiar, half foreigners as it were, though, as a matter of fact, they were not very different from the other hobbits of the Four Farthings, except in one point: they were fond of boats, and some of them could swim. Their land was originally unprotected from the east, but on that side they had built a hedge, the High Hay. It had been planted many generations ago, and was now thick and tall, for it was constantly tended. It ran all the way from Brandywine Bridge, in a big loop curving away from the river, to Haysend, where the Withy-Windle flowed out of the forest into the Brandywine, well over 20 miles from end to end. But of course it was not a complete protection. The forest drew close to the hedge in many places. The Bucklanders kept their doors locked after dark, and that also was not usual in the Shire. Now let's have a small discussion. Well, in my opinion, a solid wall, which is about 20 miles long, fully tended to by hobbits, constructed from solid materials, kept locked, and probably fully secure, well, at least to some extent. Well, such a wall is definitely a serious achievement, a serious architectural, a serious fortification achievement, and not only for hobbits, but for anyone in Middle-earth, really, especially in the Third Age. And what is more, let's look at another small excerpt from The Lord of the Rings, which shows us that Merry, Pippin, Frodo and Sam had to use a kind of a special back door in the wall in order to leave the Shire discreetly when they started Frodo's quest to destroy the ring in the fires of Mount Doom. You see, when there is such a big wall covering such a big area of land, there is most certainly a gate, an official gate, so to say, which in the case of Frodo, well, he understood perfectly well, starting his quest, that he had to stay as unnoticed as possible, and so without a doubt going through any major gate, which would definitely have, and which probably had, even though it's not mentioned in The Lord of the Rings, but it probably did have some kind of guards, some kind of hobbit gate wardens who took care of anyone going through the gate. And of course they would spread such a gossip that Frodo, who was quite a well-known person in the Shire, well, his departure, his leave would definitely be a massive gossip in itself, but especially his leaving the Shire through the main gate of the hedge of Bucklands would be a big, serious gossip. And so Frodo definitely had to avoid it, and that's why he used another route, which, as I've told you earlier, is mentioned in The Lord of the Rings in a small passage. So let's read this small piece of text. This is from the beginning of chapter 6, The Old Forest. In their shed they found the ponies, sturdy little beasts of the kind loved by hobbits, not speedy but good for a long day's work. They mounted, and soon they were riding off into the mist, which seemed to open reluctantly before them and close forbiddingly behind them. After riding for about an hour, slowly and without talking, they saw the hedge looming suddenly ahead. It was tall and netted over with silver cobwebs. "How are you going to get through this?" asked Fredegar. By the way, a small side note about Fredegar for those of you who, for example, only watched the movies and haven't read The Lord of the Rings yet. So Fredegar Bolger was another hobbit, a friend of Merry, Pippin, Frodo and Sam, but he only saw them off to the border of the Shire, as far as their traveling to the Mount Doom goes. And also he played a rather important part in Frodo's relocation from Shire to Bucklebury, which was another part of the story that wasn't covered in the movies. But let's continue reading this small piece of text. "Follow me," said Merry, "and you will see." He turned to the left along the hedge, and soon they came to a point where it bent inwards, running along the lip of a hollow. A cutting had been made at some distance from the hedge, and went sloping gently down into the ground. It had walls of brick at the sides, which rose steadily, until suddenly they arched over and formed a tunnel that dived deep under the hedge, and came out in the hollow on the other side. Here Fatty Bolger halted. "Goodbye, Frodo," he said. "I wish you were not going into the forest. I only hope you will not need rescuing before the day is out. But good luck to you, today and every day." "If there are no worse things ahead than the old forest, I shall be lucky," said Frodo. "Tell Gandalf to hurry along the east road. We shall soon be back on it, and going as fast as we can." "Goodbye," they cried, and rode down the slope and disappeared from Fredegar's sight into the tunnel. It was dark and damp. At the far end it was closed by a gate of thick-set iron bars. Merry got down and unlocked the gate, and when they had all passed through he pushed it to again. It shut with a clang, and the lock clicked. The sound was ominous.